So the categories are a good entry gate to Aristotle because they present the conceptual framework which governs the rest of Aristotle's inquiries. It's a short logical treatise, but what is at stake here is much more than what we call logic commonly. It also addresses the metaphysical question of what is, which will keep Aristotle busy, not just in the metaphysics, and which, as you know, also preoccupied Plato a lot. And like Plato, Aristotle is not just asking what is, but what really is. He thinks, as it were, that there are things that are more than others, that among things that are in the world, there is a ruling class of items and a crowd of inferior kinds of beings. Okay. So you know Plato's answer to the question. What pen really is, for example, is not this or that pen, individual pens, but the universal form of the pen, which is one and which is not sensible. And red, again, is not here nor there, but it's the form of the red. Aristotle's approach is completely different. First, he's not telling us that we talk or think nonsense when we say this is a pen or the pen is red. Instead, he says, well, let's look at the way we are all talking about pens and other stuff. And from the way we talk and combine words with each other, pen is red, we may understand how actual things combine in the world, how these things are, and also in what sense some of them really are. So the goal is to understand what really is, and the means is to look at the way we combine words to say how things are. Okay, so for example, this is a pen, or the pen is red, amounts to the formula X is Y, okay, where X is the subject, the thing you're talking about, and Y, the predicate, is what you say of the subject. And to say Y of X is to predicate Y, red, of X, pen. And to predicate in Greek is kategorein, and predication is kategoria. So you understand at least the title of the book now. The categories are not primarily about classifying things, what we call categories today, but about how we perform a basic combination of words, which is called predication, and whereby we say that things are. Okay? But there is a sense in which the categories also talk about classes of things, categories proper, since the whole point of the book is to show that there are different kinds of predications, different ways of saying X is Y, because we can use is, the verb to be, to mean different things. So let's take a famous picture. Look at the bit of red stuff on the left with the hand pointing to the sky. So you could say first about this is a man, or this is Plato if you recognize him. And you would say this because you would answer a particular question. What is it? Or what kind of substance is it? And you will ask an answer from a particular point of view, the point of view of substance. And this is only one possible point of view, because you could be asked another question like how much tall or heavy is Plato, and then your answer would be he is, or this is 6 feet tall. And there you will pick the category of quantity. Okay. And Aristotle goes on with the category of quality. Plato is pale, of relation. He's Aristotle's teacher. Of place, he's in Athens. Of time, in antiquity, for example. Or position, is standing. Or having, he's wearing shoes. Or acting, he's talking to Aristotle. Or being acted upon, being affected, is refuted by Aristotle, is text 1. So overall, there are 10 ways of understanding the verb to be as we use it, 10 kinds of being, because there are 10 main questions that you can ask to the world around you, and everything every being you will come across in the world will answer one of these questions. Okay. But then Aristotle adds to this grid another classification. He will classify these categories, and he will further distinguish within these categories classes. But let's start by playing a small game to practice what we've seen. Can you recognize the categories to which these items belong? So Plato, dog, this particular kind of paleness, man, collar, biting Plato, here and now, Linus. Linus is Aristotle's dog, in case you don't know. So of course you can recognize easily the categories here, but you may also recognize that there is a big difference in this list between saying, for example, this is a man, or this is Linus, substance, and the man is pale, or Linus is biting Plato, or any of the other kinds of predication which are not in the category of substances and which are not included in this table, but basically everything that is in blue here. Yeah? These are modifications of substances and not substances proper. And Aristotle says that these blue categories are in substances. Plato is in paleness is in Plato, whereas Plato is not in paleness. Okay, so there is a fundamental distinction here between things that are not in substances and things that are in the other categories, the 9 other categories. And there is a hierarchy too, because the 9 categories, which are not substances, they need substances in order to exist, to be. There is no paleness if there is no Plato or any other subject to be pale, to instantiate this property. And there is no biting Plato if there is no Linus or any dog to perform the task. Whereas Linus can live very happily without biting Plato, and Plato can be pale today and get suntanned tomorrow. He will lose his paleness, but he will not lose his being, right? So there is a sense in which substances are more than other categories, because they don't depend on them. Whereas all the other categories depend on substances in order to find a home to live in. So we have found our ruling class of things that really are, right? Substances. But the game is not over. We can still look for another distinction between the items within each of the 2 classes. And it's easy because you recognize among substances, for example, general items like man, dog, which look like Plato's forms, and individual items like Plato and Linus. And it's the same for the things that are in this particular kind of paleness is only one particular instantiation of color. Okay, so we have here Plato's divide between forms and individuals. But Aristotle talks differently about them. He says that forms are things that are said of individuals. They are general labels that you apply to individual things to recognize in what class they belong. We can say Plato is a man, but we can't say man is, or humankind is Plato, because there is much more in humankind than just Plato. Okay. But, and this is a big but, we also need Plato and Aristotle and many individuals to constitute humankind. Okay, how could you imagine, for example, that any animal species could exist if there is not, and there has never been, even one individual to instantiate it? So the general thing said of for Aristotle is dependent on the individual thing not said of to exist. Just as you remember, things that are in needed things that are not in order to be. So the things not said of must be here in the first place. And that's why Aristotle calls them primary substances, whereas Plato's forms are only secondary substances. So now maybe you understand why Aristotle's dog is biting Plato. Plato's forms are still in the ruling class of things, but they are not in charge anymore. Okay. And what really is now for Aristotle is this or that pen. It's not the form of the pen. Thank you very much.